From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi again, and welcome back to our second edition of the show this week as we divide our show into two parts. The first one deals with the mayor's race, and the second one, this one, is taking a more in-depth look at 4 of the aldermanic runoff races. And we have 4 races today in different parts of the city, and I think with some pretty different demographics. And here to help us sort it all out, once again, Miguel del Valle, who is I think you're becoming mandatory. You have to be on every show now. I'm really glad you're back. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. And Claudia Morell is joining us from Aldertrack. She's been on the show before too, so we got 2 old hands here to sort of sit and talk about the wards. And today we're going to talk about 10, 15, 31, and 36. So starting all the way at the very south tip of the city and coming up into Belmont, Cragen, and places like that. So anyway, let's start in numerical order because we want to be fair, do about 5 or 6 minutes on each one. Claudia, take the lead on Ward 10. South Chicago, Hegwish, South Deering. We've all kind of driven through the 10th Ward at one time or another, and a lot of Chicagoans have probably never set foot in the 10th Ward. It's kind of a different sort of place, very industrial and so forth. So who we got?
Okay, so right now in the 10th Ward runoff, we have Alderman John Pope, who was elected in 1999 and has since had a pretty easy time getting reelected. This is his 4th campaign and his first runoff, and it will be against Susan Garza, who is a former Chicago public school teacher and is aligned with the teachers union, and her father is also a union head. And so right now
we've missed the word Sedlowski, I think, right? I don't know if it's Susan
Sedlowski.
Yeah,
it's a
Garza.
Hyphenated last name,
right.
Susan Sedlowski Garza.
Right. So she is the daughter of a very famous union organizer in the area from a while back, Ed Sedlowski.
And so right now it is really a race about a couple of things. Environmental issues are taking center stage with the entire pet coke issue and KCBX terminals, which is a facility that transports and houses this petroleum byproduct. And in 2013, there was a dust storm of pet coke, and it kind of just blanketed the neighborhoods in this black dust. And so Alderman Pope has proposed and got the council to pass resolutions to kind of oversee and cap the amount of pet coke that could be in the ward. But all of his challengers this year were pretty much either for completely banning it or putting more restrictions. They don't think he went far enough. And so they've really capitalized on that issue. And so we did a poll yesterday in the ward. Oh,
this is very fresh. So breaking news. Put up the breaking news graphic. Yeah.
It was an Ogden and Fry poll, and it found that Alderman Pope still has the lead among registered voters, about 40% to Garza's around 31%, but there's still 20% undecided voters. And Tom Swiss, who conducted the poll, said the 10th Ward is one of those wards where it's hard to gauge where voters lie because a lot don't have registered phones. And they also conducted the poll in English, so they could have alienated some Spanish-speaking voters.
Well, Miguel, this is an interesting ward just historically, in so many different ways. But John Pope, if I recall, wasn't he he was a city official who got appointed to the job, wasn't he? Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, that was some time ago.
Yeah, it was about in the 90s, yeah.
Right.
And I went back this morning and spent some time rereading all the stories about the KCBX and pet coke and all that. And I was reminded that back in April, John Pope, who had been, gung-ho with the community, we're going to stop all of this pet coke and stuff, all of a sudden, one day, everybody's in City Hall waiting for this big vote back in April, and he and Alderman Burke put in a substitute amendment, which dramatically took the situation down a little bit and really undercut I think the community would say undercut the community. So that's got to
well,
have hurt him.
yeah, similar to what happened in the 25th Ward with Crawford, the Crawford plant, and the other plant. People who are concerned about the environment, who are concerned about the quality of life in the area, get involved, they get organized, they go down to City Hall, they go to see their alderman, they're told, yes, we're going to address these issues. And then when the time comes, the big businesses usually get their way.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a lot of frustration, and that's why I think there's a runoff in that ward, because people want those issues addressed.
Right.
There's a growing awareness of how the air affects people's health, what it does to folks with asthma, and overall, generally speaking, health issues. And I think that's being reflected in the dynamics in this race.
There was also this really weird thing that happened a few months ago where, and again, it just seems like one of these, politics by press releases, that a press release goes out on, I don't know when it was, late in the afternoon or something, from the refinery, BP refinery, saying we're no longer going to be shipping pet coke into Chicago. And so there's rejoicing all around. There's this big victory. And so you realize when you read the fine print of the press release that all they're saying is they're just going to be complying with the new law. 2 months after the law went into effect, they're kind of acknowledging begrudgingly that they're not going to be allowed by law to send it into Chicago. So, there has to be a lot of really cynical feeling among the electorate down there for people, for those people who this is a big issue. I would think it's a tough place for Pope to be in, because it looked like he was able to play it like he was going to be this big environmental alderman, and then all of a sudden he had to pull this switch that I'm sure he probably didn't even want to. But anyway, I can't speak to what his motives were, but.
Yeah, and during the general election, there was a ballot initiative asking if residents wanted to ban the transport and housing of pet coke, and 87, I think, % of residents voted in favor of that. And I feel like Garza has really capitalized on that, because she's received endorsements from Richard Martinez Jr., who is a candidate and who has run 3 times in the 10th and has lost every time. And he wanted an outright ban on pet coke, and also she got the endorsements of Juan Huizar, who is also against pet coke production, and also Frank Corona and Olga Batista have basically are helping Garza's campaign by donating their volunteers to her effort. So they're going to be canvassing for her throughout the ward.
Well, but as you say, the polling is showing her pretty far behind at this point.
Yeah.
She's got a couple of weeks to pick up, 8 or 9 points or something. That's going to be quite a challenge.
I just want to point out that from a political standpoint, a lot of the old HDO folks, members, are from the 10th Ward.
Right, that's right.
And those
that
folks,
was the birthplace of the HDO.
That's right. So
it?
those folks are still around, and they were very supportive of Pope.
Yeah. Okay, we got to move along. Let's move to West Englewood and Brighton Park and back of the yards. Kind of an odd ward that was just created in this last thing, the 15th Ward, right? Now, tell us the story about the 15th Ward. How did it come into being?
So the 15th Ward is one of those newly redistricted wards that is now predominantly Hispanic. I believe 70% of the residents are Hispanic. And so the current alderman, Tony Folks, has decided to run in the neighboring 16th Ward. She was actually redistricted out of the ward. And so now it's a matchup between Raymond Lopez, who's the ward committeeman, and Rafael Yanez, who is a former police officer and does a lot of outreach with youth and police. And so this is Raymond Lopez's second time running for alderman, and he almost had the 50 plus 1% he needed to avoid a runoff. He was
Oh,
about
really? He came that
100
close?
votes shy
Oh,
of
okay.
avoiding a
All right.
runoff, because Yanez only got about 22% of the vote.
And he didn't have Dick Mell to go out there and take care of that for him.
No,
Get a
he
couple
did
extra
not.
votes. I'm sorry. My apologies to Alderman Mell. I didn't mean that.
But since then, he has gotten the support and endorsement and money from Alderman Ed Burke, Alderman Joe Moreno, Alderman Tom Tunney, and Alderman Brendan Riley. And so they are helping him out.
That's kind of a blue blood list. Of
Yeah,
aldermen,
and it's I feel like it's both a good thing for him and somewhat a bad thing, because now the Yanez campaign is really highlighting him as part of the Democratic machine of Chicago, and that he will put the machine over the needs of the residents. And so they put out this negative mailer saying that he doesn't care about the 15th Ward and he isn't going to do anything to really help the residents. And Lopez says that it was a completely inappropriate mailer. And so Yanez is also closely aligned with Chuy Garcia. Garcia chairs his campaign committee, and they know each other from the nonprofit work that
from
Yanez did. And actually, Dion Miller-Perez, which is Yanez's campaign manager, actually ran a couple of Garcia's campaigns back in the day. And he told me that on election day, Garcia actually kept calling Yanez to see like how he was doing in the polls, and so they're very close, and they're basically running a joint campaign.
So I mean, it sounds like it's almost like a little proxy runoff of Rahm versus Chuy, right?
Yeah, So it'll be an interesting turnout.
Well, Chuy has connected with a number of aldermanic runoff races, and you have people taking sides. Not all have taken sides, but Chuy is doing something that of course he needed to do, and that is connect with these local races that are generating turnout that will end up helping him as well.
So we don't have any polling on this one, right?
No, we haven't done any polling.
That'll be coming in. Do you have any sense of what's going on down there? Is it lopsided, or have you been picking up any intelligence?
I have not picked up any intelligence on the south side, but I do know that there are a lot of folks from the Garcia campaign who are very active in this race and are providing resources, both financial and human resources.
Now, of course, Tony Fox jumped out of, was redistricted out of the 15th and went into the 16th and ran there, and she's in a runoff of her own now.
With Shirley Coleman's daughter.
Shirley Coleman's daughter, right. And now today, let's not get too diverted into other wards, but I found that really interesting today, that now the new allegation is that she actually lives in
Dalton.
Dalton, is it? Yeah. So Shirley Coleman's daughter may not even live in the ward. But anyway, that's a technicality that can be ironed out. If you get elected, you just get to
I also want to point out that the CTU and I think AFSCME and other unions are supporting Yanez. So he has strong labor support as well.
Yeah, he's also getting support from United Working Families, as is Garza, which I forgot to mention before.
All right.
So they have a lot of labor support helping them with canvassing. And Folks has actually endorsed Yanez.
She has?
That's what the campaign has told me.
Folks endorsed
As
that's
has
big. Okay. All right.
Alderman-elect David Moore in the 17th Ward, who's also closely aligned with UWF. So they've been really helpful.
Right. So Alderman Folks is part of that progressive caucus, the real, what I call the real progressive caucus, not the phony progressive caucus in the city council, and they're attempting to add another member here by electing Yanez. They were able to add Carlos Rosas in the 35th Ward, who has become part of that caucus. So there are a lot of folks who are counting on a Yanez victory to grow that progressive caucus in the city council. Well,
that is definitely one to watch on election night. There's no doubt about that. So let's move up north a little bit. The 31st Ward is I just find it really interesting because it's Ray Suarez, right? Ray
Well,
Suarez
not only is it Ray Suarez, who has been in office since 1991.
Yeah.
But the committeeman there is Joe Barrios.
I
Cook
forgot
County
that.
assessor,
Right.
and the chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party.
Right.
And between the two of them, they have about $2.5 million in their campaign funds.
For an
Suarez has $1.2 million in his campaign fund. Wow. That's what an alderman does these days.
Right.
And Barrios has just as much money in his fund, between his committeeman fund and his assessor fund. He has even more. They have been there for some time, of course. They are being challenged by a lady by the name of Millie Santiago, who's a former reporter with Telemundo, more recently worked for the state of Illinois, and got in the race and is being supported by State Representative Louis Flores, Louis Arroyo, I should say, Louis Arroyo, who is the state rep of the area, and has a candidate that we'll talk about in just a minute in the 36th ward.
Okay.
And some folks figure that one of the reasons why Louis Arroyo jumped into the 31st ward race was to keep them occupied so that he could elect his guy in the 36th ward, because the guy running against him, his guy in the 36th ward, is a Joe Barrios ally.
Okay.
Did you follow me on that?
Yeah.
And Ray Suarez has given $20,000 to the campaign of Louis Arroyo's candidate in the 36th ward. So these wards are next to each other. The 36th ward kind of wraps around the 30th ward and is right next to the 31st ward. But the fact of the matter is that there's a power struggle here.
Yeah.
Excuse
me, is Louis Gutierrez involved in this in some way?
Well, Gutierrez has taken a side with Louis Arroyo, and he has supported Millie Santiago.
So he's
even
with
though
Santiago.
even though he's been aligned with Joe Barrios.
My head's hurting.
That's right.
And then also Garcia endorsed Santiago as well.
And so Garcia has been looking for support in these runoff elections, and Louis Arroyo has made a calculation, along with his candidate, who is Gilbert Villegas.
Yeah.
I mentioned his name for the first time. That there are a lot of Latino votes there in that ward that went for Chuy in the last election, and so they determined that it's in Gilbert Villegas' best interest to line up with Chuy. So Gilbert Villegas and Chuy have endorsed each other, and then Millie Santiago and Chuy have endorsed each other.
You know what's really interesting about this? We've been having this whole conversation here, and we're not talking about Ray Suarez. He's the alderman. He's the incumbent. He's been the incumbent for 30 years.
He is the vice mayor.
He is the vice mayor. So what did he do wrong? I mean, how did this guy get tripped up? Did he got into a runoff?
Well, number one, Ray Suarez has been an Emmanuel supporter and has voted with him practically 100% of the time.
Oh, we just happen to have the list here. Let's take a look. Ray Suarez. It'll take me a minute to find it, but anyway, yeah, he's on the list here somewhere. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right, and the other thing, remember, all these folks are running in new wards.
Hold on, just one second. He's actually kind of a rebel on the city council. He's kind of an anti-Rahm guy. He only voted with Rahm Emanuel 98%.
Oh, 98%. Okay, I thought it was 100%. and so Suarez has been around a long time, and he's chaired the city council housing committee. Recently, there have been some good things that have happened with now, for example, requiring developers to contribute to an affordable housing fund. But prior to that, I mean, groups had a really hard time getting Suarez to afford to support the development of affordable housing. And so he has a history of not being as responsive as he needs to be to the big issues. A good record with providing constituent services from his ward office. I used to live in the ward until I was mapped out of that ward recently, but
that's
for obvious reasons. But a good record of constituent services, but not as good a record in dealing with issues that are of concern to the broader community. And then there's a large Hispanic population in that ward, there is in the 36th ward, which was newly created as an Hispanic majority ward. That population is made up heavily of Mexican and Mexican Americans. The fact that Suarez was aligned with Emmanuel, I think, affected him the first time around. That maybe that's why now Ray Suarez is not talking that much in this race about Emmanuel, and why Millie Santiago, his opponent, has lined up with Chuy Garcia.
So what's the deal with Millie Santiago? I mean, she was a journalist and she was an anchor, so she must be very well known, I'm sure, in the Hispanic community. She was an anchor on Telemundo, was it? I think anyway. And then she went off into, as some of us have done, go off into government public relations for a while, and then back out of that. Is she? What do we say? Is she equipped to be an alderman?
I think she's equipped to be an alderman. She certainly knows the issues.
Yeah.
She covered these issues. She knows all the elected officials, and has been vocal on some issues that are important to the community. But is she equipped? Yeah, I think she's equipped.
Yeah, but it just seems like there are so many of these races. Like, you know, we kid the Mells, but you know that Deb Mell came in, you know, just a few votes short. It seems almost impossible when you think about these grand old organizations in Chicago and how they have just they're all running up on the rocks for various reasons. It's kind of interesting. Shall we switch to?
Yeah, I did want to mention that the other candidate in the 36th ward is Omar Aquino.
Well, let's do that. Let's move to the 36th ward.
Yeah, in the 36th ward, Omar Aquino is the other candidate. I mentioned Gilbert Villegas, who is aligned with Representative Luis Arroyo, and then Omar Aquino is attempting to run an independent campaign. But the fact of the matter is that his father, Mr. Aquino, was the ward superintendent for the 31st ward. So he comes out of the Barrio-Suarez organization.
Yeah, and Jacob Kaplan, the executive director of the Cook County Democratic Party, is running both the Suarez and Aquino campaigns.
Right.
So
and Barrios has, if you look at the financial reports, you'll see Barrios' fingerprints all over, because a lot of folks who contribute to Barrios because of his work as assessor are now contributing to Omar Aquino.
Yeah. So I'm still very confused about where the 31st and the 36th wards are, because again, it's one of these things, they've just been kind of squishing them around and moving them around. You said earlier that a good reference would be like Addison, the north, down to Grand, and all the way from Costner all the way out to Harlem.
But it's
like
a
bowling alley, but it's a U-shaped bowling alley.
Ward. It's one of these tortured configurations. The only one that I think is more tortured than this one is the second ward.
Now, is there a political reason for that?
Certainly, in this case,
he said
Alderman Sposato didn't have much of a say in how this ward was configured. He challenged the configuration unsuccessfully.
Let's see, Alderman Sposato voted with the mayor 66% of the time. I guess that explains the creation of this
Alderman
ward.
Sposato is a part of the Progressive Caucus, and I respect the fact that he takes positions. And he moved and ran in the 38th ward and won.
Well, interestingly, I live in that ward, and I thought it was so interesting that he portrayed himself as the incumbent, which of course he wasn't. But we got thousands of pieces of mail from him standing in front of fire trucks or something and saying, "Re-elect Alderman Sposato." But you're not our alderman. But anyway, they bought it, and he got re-elected, or he got elected.
And I'm glad that happened.
Yeah. So 36 then was something that was kind of created as a way to get rid of Sposato, among other objectives.
I think in part, but it was created as an Hispanic majority ward. But it was created also, I think, and this is speculation on my part, I think it was also created in a way that it would allow Joe Barrios and Suarez in the 31st Ward to have influence in the outcome of the 36th Ward race, because it includes precincts of the old 31st Ward that are now being worked heavily by the Aquino campaign, and with support from Joe Barrios.
Does Aldertrack have any polling on these guys?
We haven't done the poll yet for them.
Well, we anxiously await that one. And again, what is your intelligence telling you on the street? Anything about these races?
Well, the 36th Ward race is tough to call.
Yeah.
Both sides are sinking a lot of money into the races. Both sides are heavily working the precincts. People are going door to door. They're doing literature drops, and both sides have patronage armies. You know,
so this really
patronage,
is a proxy.
by the way, just in case you didn't know, Ken, patronage is not dead in the city of Chicago.
I thought I read that somewhere.
It's not dead. And so I've noticed an increase in the number of city services being delivered in the 36th Ward, trees being trimmed and other services. And so I suspect that there's a direct line to City Hall in making sure that services are delivered. And
so that's what I'm finding really interesting about some of these races, is that they really are becoming proxy wars. I mean, they really are. They're like Chuy Garcia forces versus the Rahm Emanuel forces.
But Omar Aquino in the 36th Ward race, I've yet to see a lit piece with Emanuel on it.
I see. Okay.
And I certainly haven't seen a lit piece with Barrios on it either. And so he is attempting, and he's an impressive young man. You know, a graduate from Loyola, worked on Tammy Duckworth's staff, and I think is sincere from what I have been able to observe. Gilbert Villegas has his credentials too. Comes off, sounds like a Marine, because he's a veteran, a Vietnam veteran, but has an extensive experience in dealing with business groups. He was director of the Hispanic Contractors Association and worked with the Capital Development Board of the state of Illinois. And so he has a strong background too. So it's going to be a close one.
Just a final quick thought from you as a veteran Hispanic politician in Chicago. I get a sense that we're seeing an increase in the kind of the quality and the just sort of the general level of excellence of Hispanic candidates.
Absolutely. You have a younger generation, people who are college educated, people who know issues and delve into the issues. The quality is increasing. I'm glad to say.
That's a great place to end. And I just want to thank you both for being here and telling us about these 4 unbelievably interesting races. It's just great. Claudia Morell from Aldertrack, thanks for being here. We'll see you again here, I'm sure, sometime. And Miguel del Valle, former mayoral candidate who's been through all of this. He's done all of it. Former what do you call that?
City Clerk.
City Clerk, yes.
And State Senator.
And State Senator. I knew that one. I couldn't think of City Clerk. Thanks for being here, and thank you for being here. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom, Episode 2. It's a production of CAN TV and a community service, and you can find us right here on cable, but you can also see us online at this address, and you can check out all the others that we've been doing in this series too, and I hope you will do that. You can subscribe to us on iTunes too. I am Ken Davis, thanking you for joining us, and we'll see you next week with 2 more shows on Chicago Newsroom. Thanks. Bye.